I hate working the night shift at this gas station. It's always so quiet and eerie. But tonight is different. Something feels off, like I'm being watched. My two co-workers, Mike and Sarah, are acting strange too. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's a palpable tension in the air. Maybe it's the fact that the only customers we've had all night have been strange, sketchy characters who come in and out quickly without saying a word. As the night wears on, the atmosphere only gets more intense. The fluorescent lights flicker on and off, casting strange shadows on the walls. The sound of the wind outside sounds like a ghostly whisper, and I swear I can hear footsteps coming from the abandoned lot next door. Then, out of nowhere, Mike screams. I turn to see what's going on, but he's just staring at something behind me with wide, terrified eyes. I spin around, but there's nothing there. That's when I realize that I'm not alone in this gas station. The feeling of being watched intensifies, and I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I turn back to Mike and Sarah, but they're both staring at me now, their expressions twisted in fear. I start to panic, wondering if I'm losing my mind. But then I see it, a dark figure lurking in the corner, just out of sight. Its eyes gleam in the dim light, and I realize that we're not alone in this gas station. I want to run, but my legs feel like lead. The figure starts to move closer, and I can feel its icy breath on my neck. It whispers in my ear, telling me things I can't understand, things that make my blood run cold. I try to scream, but nothing comes out. The figure looms closer, and I can feel its presence enveloping me. I close my eyes, praying that this is all just a nightmare. But when I open them again, I'm still in the gas station. The figure is gone, but Mike and Sarah are still staring at me, their eyes filled with fear. And I know, deep down, that we'll never be the same again after tonight. As I look around the gas station, I realize that something has changed. The atmosphere is different now, even more eerie than before. It feels like we're trapped in some kind of nightmare, and there's no way out. Mike and Sarah start to whisper to each other, but I can't make out what they're saying. Their voices are muffled, as if they're speaking in another language. I start to feel a sense of dread creeping over me, like we're all in grave danger. Suddenly, the lights flicker again, and I hear a strange scratching sound coming from outside. It sounds like something is trying to claw its way inside. I glance over at the security cameras, but they're all blacked out, as if something is blocking the signal. I turn back to my co-workers, but they're no longer there. Instead, there's a strange, shadowy figure standing in their place. It's tall and menacing, with glowing red eyes that seem to pierce through my very soul. I try to run, but my legs won't move. The figure starts to move closer, and I can feel its icy breath on my face. It whispers in my ear again, telling me things I can't comprehend. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Suddenly, the figure lunges at me, and everything goes black. When I come to, I'm lying on the ground, surrounded by shattered glass and twisted metal. The gas station is in ruins, and there's no sign of my co-workers. It's like they never existed at all. I stumble outside, trying to make sense of what just happened. But as I look up, I realize that something is watching me from the darkness. Its red eyes glint in the moonlight, and I know that I'm not safe. I start to run, knowing that I need to get as far away from this place as possible. But as I do, I can hear a haunting laughter echoing in my mind, and I know that I'll never be the same again. I keep running, my heart pounding in my chest as I try to put as much distance as I can between myself and that terrible gas station. But no matter how fast I go, I can't shake the feeling that something is still following me, watching my every move. As I make my way down a deserted road, I see something up ahead that makes my blood run cold. It's the figure from the gas station, and it's walking towards me with slow, deliberate steps. I try to turn around and run the other way, but my legs won't move. It's like I'm stuck in place, unable to escape. The figure looms closer and closer, until it's towering over me, filling my entire field of vision. It reaches out a long, bony hand and touches my forehead, and suddenly I'm transported into a dark, twisted version of reality. Everything around me is distorted and warped, like I'm trapped in a nightmare. I hear a voice in my head, a voice that sounds like the figure from the gas station. It tells me that I'm trapped here forever, that I'll never escape this place. I feel a wave of hopelessness wash over me, like I'm doomed to spend eternity in this terrible place. But then, something shifts inside me. A spark of determination ignites, and I realize that I can't give up. I can't let this thing win. With all my strength, I push back against the darkness, fighting to break free. It's a struggle like I've never experienced before, but somehow I manage to hold on. And then, in a burst of light, everything changes. The twisted reality around me dissolves, and I'm back on the deserted road, the figure from the gas station nowhere in sight. I keep running, not stopping until I've put miles of distance between myself and that terrible place. And though I'm haunted by the memory of what happened there, I know that I've survived something that most people never will. From that day forward, I'm always looking over my shoulder, always wary of what's lurking in the darkness. But I'm also stronger, more resilient than I ever thought possible. And as long as I keep fighting, I know that I'll be able to overcome anything that comes my way. Days go by and I try to go back to my normal routine, but I can't seem to shake off the feeling that something is watching me. Every shadow, every strange noise makes my heart race, and I can't help but jump at the slightest sound. One night, as I'm lying in bed, I hear a soft tapping at my window. I try to ignore it, thinking it's just a tree branch, but the tapping becomes more insistent. It's like something is trying to get in. I gather up all my courage and slowly make my way over to the window. As I peer out into the darkness, I see something that makes me freeze in terror. It's the glowing red eyes of the figure from the gas station, staring back at me from outside. I stumble backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. How is this possible? How could that thing have followed me all the way here? Suddenly, I hear a scratching sound at the door. It's like something is trying to claw its way inside. I try to back away, but my legs won't move. It's like I'm rooted to the spot, helpless to do anything. The scratching gets louder and louder, until it's like it's inside my head. I can feel it crawling over my skin, like tiny insects burrowing under my flesh. And then, with a sudden burst of energy, I break free from the paralysis. I run to the door and slam it shut, locking it as tightly as I can. But even as I do, I know it's only a matter of time before that thing finds a way in. And when it does, I'll be trapped once again in a nightmare from which there's no escape. I spend the rest of the night cowering in my room, praying that the morning will come quickly. But even as the first rays of light begin to filter through the curtains, I know that the horror isn't over yet. It's just beginning. I take a deep breath and try to calm myself down, but my mind is racing with fear and anxiety. Suddenly, I hear a strange sound coming from my closet. It's a low, guttural growl that sends chills down my spine. I slowly make my way over to the closet, my heart pounding in my chest. As I open the door, a shadowy figure jumps out, tackling me to the ground. It's one of my coworkers from the gas station, and he's been possessed by the same evil entity that haunted us that fateful night. As I struggle to break free, I realize that the entity has been using the gas station as a portal to enter our world. It's been preying on unsuspecting victims for years, luring them in with its deceptive appearance and then trapping them in a never-ending cycle of fear and despair. I manage to break free from my coworker's grasp and run out of the room. As I'm trying to make my escape, I realize that the entity has possessed not just my coworker, but also the other gas station attendant. They're both hunting me down, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. I run outside and try to find help, but the entire town is deserted. It's like everyone has vanished into thin air. And as I look up at the sky, I realize that the stars are all wrong. They're not the familiar constellations I'm used to seeing, but strange, alien patterns that seem to shift and change before my eyes. I come across a group of survivors who have been hiding out in a nearby building. They tell me that the entity has taken over the entire town, and that there's no escape. They're preparing to make a final stand against the entity, but they need my help. As we prepare to fight the entity, I realize that the only way to defeat it is to sacrifice myself. I'll have to willingly let the entity possess me, and then use my willpower to fight it from within. It's a risky plan, but it's the only chance we have. I take a deep breath and steel myself for what's to come. As the entity takes hold of me, I feel a surge of power coursing through my veins. I use that power to push back against the darkness, fighting with everything I've got. It's a long and grueling battle, but in the end, I emerge victorious. The entity is banished back to its own realm, and the town is once again safe. But even as I celebrate my victory, I know that the memory of that night will haunt me forever. And I can't help but wonder if there are other entities out there, waiting to make their move. Days pass and life seems to return to normal. The town slowly repopulates and the gas station reopens with new employees. I try to forget about that fateful night, but the memory lingers on in the back of my mind. One night, as I'm closing up the gas station, I notice a strange figure walking towards me. It's dressed in all black, with a hood pulled up over its head. I can't see its face, but I can feel its gaze fixated on me. As the figure approaches, I start to feel uneasy. My heart races and my hands begin to shake. It's like I'm back in that nightmare all over again. The figure stops in front of me and pulls back its hood, revealing a familiar face. It's my coworker from the gas station, the one who had been possessed by the entity. I take a step back, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. But he just stands there, staring at me with a strange intensity. Suddenly, he lunges forward and grabs hold of me, his fingers digging into my flesh. I try to fight back, but he's too strong. It's like he's possessed again. As he drags me towards the gas station, I realize with a sinking feeling that the entity is still out there, still looking for a way to come back into our world. It turns out that the entity had never truly been defeated. It had simply gone dormant, waiting for the right opportunity to strike again. And now, it had found a new host in my former coworker. As he drags me into the gas station, I see that he's set up a strange altar in the back room. There are candles burning and symbols etched into the floor. It's like he's been preparing for this moment for a long time. He starts to chant in a language I don't understand, his voice growing louder and more frenzied with each passing moment. And as he does, I feel a dark presence surrounding me, like I'm being consumed by an all-encompassing blackness. I realize with a sickening feeling that the entity has possessed my former coworker once again, and that it's using him as a vessel to enter our world once more. With all my strength, I try to break free from his grasp, but it's like I'm caught in a vice. And then, with a sudden burst of energy, I manage to break free and run towards the door. But just as I'm about to escape, I feel a searing pain in my back. I turn around to see my former coworker standing behind me, a bloody knife in his hand. It's like everything is happening in slow motion. I feel the world spinning around me, and then everything goes black. As I lay there, dying on the gas station floor, I realize with a final, chilling thought that the entity had never truly been defeated. It had just found a new host, and it would continue to haunt this town for years to come. Days pass and the town begins to feel different. It's like the air is thicker and heavier, and a sense of foreboding hangs over everything. I start to see strange things out of the corner of my eye, shadows moving when there's no one there, whispers on the wind that I can't quite make out. And then, one night, I wake up to find that my room is filled with a thick, black fog. It's so dense that I can barely see my own hand in front of my face. I hear a voice whispering my name, and I feel something cold and clammy brush against my cheek. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. The fog begins to swirl around me, like it's alive. I feel hands reaching out from the darkness, grabbing hold of me and dragging me towards some unknown destination. I try to fight back, but it's like I'm caught in a nightmare. Everything is slow and sluggish, and my movements are clumsy and ineffective. I stumble forward, and suddenly find myself standing in front of the gas station once again. The building is dark and foreboding, like it's been abandoned for years. But then, the door creaks open, and I hear a voice calling out to me from inside. It's the voice of my former coworker, the one who had been possessed by the entity. But there's something different about it now, something more sinister and unsettling. I step inside, and the door slams shut behind me with a deafening bang. I realize with a sinking feeling that I'm trapped, that I'll never be able to leave this place again. The gas station is different now, like it's been transformed into a twisted, nightmarish version of itself. The walls are covered in strange symbols, and there are candles burning everywhere. And then, I see something moving in the shadows. It's the figure of my former coworker, but it's like he's been twisted and deformed by some unseen force. His eyes are black pits, and his skin is pale and clammy. He starts to advance towards me, his movements jerky and unnatural. I try to run, but my legs won't move. It's like I'm rooted to the spot. And then, just as he's about to grab hold of me, I wake up, drenched in sweat and panting for breath. But the nightmare isn't over yet. As I look around my room, I realize with a sickening feeling that there's a strange, dark presence in the air. It's like the entity has followed me out of the gas station, and now it's lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. For weeks after the nightmarish events at the gas station, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Everywhere I went, I felt like there was something lurking in the shadows, just waiting to pounce. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I started to notice strange things happening around me. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut without any apparent cause, and I would hear whispers on the wind that I couldn't quite make out. I became convinced that the entity from the gas station had followed me home, that it was determined to claim me as its own. I tried to seek help, but no one would believe me. They all thought I was crazy, that I was just imagining things. And then, one night, I woke up to find the entity standing at the foot of my bed. It was even more twisted and deformed than before, and its eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. It reached out towards me with its cold, clammy hands, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. But then, something strange happened. The entity started to shrink and shrivel up, like it was being drained of its power. And then, I heard a voice speaking in my mind. It was the voice of my former coworker, the one who had been possessed by the entity. He told me that he had found a way to defeat the entity, that he had discovered a ritual that would banish it back to the depths of the underworld. I followed his instructions, performing the ritual with trembling hands and a pounding heart. And then, in a blinding flash of light, the entity was gone. The room was empty, and I was left standing there, shaking and gasping for breath. But the victory was short-lived. As I turned to leave the room, I saw a strange symbol etched into the wall, one that I hadn't noticed before. It was the same symbol that had been etched into the walls of the gas station, the one that had signaled the arrival of the entity in the first place. And as I stared at the symbol, I realized with a sickening feeling that the entity wasn't gone after all. It had merely been weakened, and now it was biding its time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I knew then that I would never be truly safe, that the entity would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim me as its own. And so I lived the rest of my life in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder and never truly able to relax. For me, the horror of that night at the gas station would never truly be over, and I would always be haunted by the memory of the entity that had almost claimed me. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this with you, don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.